But let me say some theoretical notions and discussions. I think that it will be useful in general for the conference on the right to the city. Well, first of all, I think that we have to discuss about the notion of post-colonialism and how we can decolonize our Western way of thinking, and to focus not only in the mainstream mass and big social movements, urban or rural movements, but as the colonial theory shows us how we can see the so-called subaltern movements that can destabilize not only the notions like the state or the capital, but also in the micro level, in the molecular level, how we can negotiate our multiplied identities, and of course to go beyond the divisions of West and East, North and South. So I think Istanbul, a metropolis that is in between West and East, is a very interesting case study. Also, I have to say that it's very important to draw attention on the recent strand of thought on intersectional approaches that examine the crossings, interferences, and diffractions of the multiple systems of domination, oppression, and discrimination in the fields of race, class, gender, culture, age, ability, disability, a lot of categories. The theory of intersectionality claims that all these categories will have to see them all together, and because the subjects are situated in framework of multiplied, interactive forms of oppression and also privileges through social constructed categories. So let me now say some things about the famous work of Henri Lefebvre on the right to the city. Next year is also the celebration for the 50 years of the first publication of the book. Early '68 was the first publication. The big movements and uprisings across Europe, Paris, Prague, but not only, also in other continents. So Lefebvre's main point of departure was that the city is a projection of society on the ground that is not only on the actual site, but at a specific level perceived and conceived by thought. The city is the place of confrontations and of conflictual relations. The city is the site of desire and site of revolutions. Also, Lefebvre clarifies that the right to the city is not a typical right to nature, but in the face of this pseudo-right, the right to the city and demand. So Lefebvre tried in that time to conceptualize a higher, let's say, right that includes all the rights to health, to education, to housing, to communication, to culture, to sexuality, whatever. And in order to do this, one of his next famous books, The Conduction of Space, he argues in this book that the space is not an empty container that is filled with actions, images, relations, and ideologies, but it constitutes a social product or a complex social construction based on social values and the social production of meanings which affects spatial practices and perceptions. So Lefebvre's main method is that of trialectic analysis, where space is diversified in the physical, mental, social space, or spatial practice representations of space, representational space, and or perceived, conceived, lived space. We are living always in between in all these spaces, not only in the physical space, but there are also social relations that produce the space. There is also a representation of the space when we imagine a place, a neighborhood, a city, a country that we will visit. We have a representation of this place. And of course, there are ideological mechanisms for these representations. And the question is how we can, as I mentioned before, how we can decolonize these representations and to focus on the real social relations that produce also some physical spaces. Now, in recent years, the discussion on the right to the city is enriched with the notion of commons, urban commons, which, according to several not only scholars or thinkers, but also social movements, urban commons evoking territories governed by a group of people, the so-called commoners, and the social relationship that underpins that governance. Hence, so we can say that commons do not exist per se, but they are making, in times of movements, of social struggles, and they are constituted through the social process of commoning. And I think this is the most important dimension of, let's say, of this themes here about the commoning, the social relations among the people that tried commons. And of course, commons are not clear spaces, always are in between the multiply power relations and systems of domination. So I think that it is very useful, the proposal of Stavros Stavridis, who said that it's better to think about commons as a threshold to other worlds and not as a gated community, as an enclave, as a clear space, but is a space in transition. It's always, so it has to be always open to newcomers, open to usage, open to new people. And I think that the example of the Gezia pricing that I will mention later we will discuss this notion of the threshold in the case of Gezia part. Also, I think that you are familiar with the discussion of autonomous Marxist analysis who tries to conceptualize commons also in the same way, but also to think about commons beyond the dipole of state or market management. And in the, as I mentioned, in the common processes that the people, the so-called agent, can create different ways of sharing and communalize not only the so-called common pool resources that probably will be the water, the air, the internet, things like Wikipedia, but also how we can problematize also other categories like the gender, the age, the ability, disability, and how we can be always in a position to negotiate our privileges and previous identities. So after this theoretical discussion, I will try now to focus on Istanbul. Okay, I'm not living in Istanbul, but I think that it is a very interesting case study, and I hope that here there are a lot of friends from Turkey to help me after the discussion about the events in urban social movements and Gezi uprising. But I want to use this example in order to rethink about the previous notions. So, okay, Istanbul is one of the biggest metropolitan areas across the world. Approximately, it has more than 15 million residents, and of course, it's a neoliberal urban metropolis with hundreds, dozens of neoliberal urban projects. You can see this map here. All these yellow areas are new urban projects. Some of them are the so-called new Istanbul, the expansion of the city to the north, to the Black Sea, where a new airport is already constructed. I think the next years will be finished. Also, a lot of mega projects, malls, so entrepreneurial and shopping and companies areas. There is a huge new bridge, the so-called third bridge in the Bosporus. See underwater highways and new metro systems. You can see here before the construction of the new highway in the north, that this is before the third bridge. The last forests of the wider area of Istanbul cut in order to create the new city in the north and the new highways. Istanbul, there is, I think that there is a dialectic, let's say, a condition of new population, newcomers, and also disposition, stories of disposition and newcoming. I think that the most important issue about the urban reconstruction of Istanbul is the 90% of the city was built with so-called informal ways, makes it so-called, and in the perimeter of the city from 50s, 60s, after the Second World War. From that time, Istanbul had less than 1 million residents, and now 10 million. So a lot of newcomers came, especially from Anatolia. It's connected with the Kurdish issue, this disposition of the population of the Anatolia, and they came in Istanbul. They settled in these informal settlements, and now these places and there are these new blocks, these new high-rise buildings without any social life, only highway streets and high-rise blocks. The so-called the company, state-private company, Turkey, is the construction company, and built 400,000 houses within the perimeter of the city, that which are followed, as I said, by the massive forced reviews and demolishing all the informal settlements. This was, for example, 2 years before the Gezi uprising, the Turkish Housing Development Administration said it as the country's year of urban transformation in order to increase the revenues of tourism, cultural industries, and of course the financial sector. Of course, as I said before, the one main pillar was the the transformation of the perimeter of the city, and the other one was the gentrification processes. The gentrification policies, of course, started from 80s in the historical part of the city, where massive demolitions took place and fires also were put to the old wooden houses that surrounded the historical monuments. Since then, hundreds of buildings have been demolished and only few of them rebuilt with concrete and wood paneling as representations of the old Ottoman roads. So we can say that it is like now like an urban scenography with the sole aim to attract tourists. And today, the gentrification policies include, of course, the disposition of poor families, but also migrants, Roma people, the criminalization and stigmatization of sex workers, and other undesired groups. This is the famous neighborhood of Tarlabasi. For some years, how is it now, and this is the future plan. At the same time, it's very important to say about the Islamic version of gentrification, which is expressed by the religious conservative attacks on the street life bars and cafes in the Beyoğlu area. And we can say that the aim is to create, to transform the system to a conservative, let's say, Islamic Disneyland. And also, one other very important thing is the gated communities. Also in the perimeter of the city, some 1,000 gated communities are in Istanbul nowadays. And we can see them as new medieval towns for upper economic strata. And besides the reference, of course, to safety, comfortability, and distance from the disturbance of the center, one of the particular features is that their advertisement is complemented by nostalgic references of the supposed lost past of Istanbul. And I like very much a quote of the Bosphorus Gate community, this one, which says that some of us miss our homes in gardens, some of us those selective 5 o'clock teas, some of us our childhood parks. Yes, each age is wistful for a different Istanbul. Now there is Bosphorus City, which combines all these beauties with modern comfort, brings back together what everyone misses, and of course protects the environment. So following the above quote, it became clear that the emerging gated communities are not only closed spaces, but also they seek to be attractive through the usurpation of the memory in the form of representation. And in particular, the Lefebvrean, as I said, space of representation is appropriated in order to accelerate the process of spatial enclosures, both in the physical and social space. And these are the politics of the so-called city branding, place marketing, which became one of the main tools for the advancement of the city in the global hierarchy. And a lot of events, mega events from 90s, like the Olympic Games, the European Capital of Culture, tried to transform the city and to present the city in the Western international reliability criteria, and so they select some specific selective elements of the past, while at the same time also essential elements of the city which constitute the living memory. And to conclude about the Islamic neoliberal policies, of course, we have not to forget the so-called Holy Islamic family, according to which the position of the woman is at home, either in the gated communities or in the Toki buildings. And as you know, the government made a lot of insensitive statements about the number of children each woman should have, 3. and the process of abortions, cesarean sections, and at the same time the women murdered Turkey skyrocketed from 60 in the early 2000s to more than the same year of the Gezi uprising. So it can be argued that Islamic neoliberal policies direct control over the female body to a side of biological labor reproduction. And with these policies, the female subject has been denied the space with all complexities, but reduced to a monolithic, passive entity of patriarchal political hegemony. We can say that there is a double war, a war on space and a war on body. The Islamic, let's say, biopolitics have these two dimensions. Okay, I don't have time to say a lot of things about the Gezi uprising. You know about the events. I just want to mention that, of course, it was not just an uprising against environmental destruction of the park, but it was a very good opportunity for multiply actors, groups, movements to express their struggle, their indignation against the policies. According to the network of urban social movements, Mr. Leclerc, correct if I don't pronounce it well, Gezi resistance rebellion where we said a high tone reject the confiscation of our common spaces. So we can say that the oppression of homosexuals, the large-scale urban projects, and the gentrification policies, the environmental degradation, the government displacement of Yejekondou residents, the criminalization, of course, of leftists groups, the free speech censorships, the timeless oppression of Alevi and Kurds of the Islamic family are some of the reasons that led a multitude of people to participate in the Gezi Park uprising. So a multiply of factors and also a multiply of struggles emerged during the Gezi uprising. And I want to finish with the words of a protester from LGBT blog who said that I am a feminist, I'm both Alevi and Kurdish and gay. As LGBT, we have been here from day one because we didn't want the trees to be cut down. The trees and their shadows, or Gezi Park in general, is a symbol. To be part of this historical moment is in itself very important for us. As LGBT communities, we are always treated as the other. We are here in order to show our existence and visibility. There are many of us from different groups here who have united together. The struggle is beautiful. The people are very warm towards each other, and there is a great sense of solidarity. So I think that this is a very good paradigm to speech saying that how important is to negotiate all the intersectional power relations and to try to imagine and to think words that we want to finalize with this, that is omnia sunt communia, that it is common for everyone. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Erkan, please introduce yourself.
So I start. Rojbash, this means Kalimera. I'm here and those two friends from North Kurdistan couldn't come. Their names are Agit and Güner. Tried to prepare the speech, but they didn't get the visa, unfortunately. So I'm here to do the speech on behalf of them. About the title is more or less a democratization of the cities in North Kurdistan. North Kurdistan is called by us also as Bakur. Actually, I forgot to say, Agit, Güner, me, we are all active in the Mesopotamian ecology movement, which is some years old and active in Bakur in northern Kurdistan. Yes, to say. Okay. So, I go a little in the history. When the Turkish state was founded, the Republic of Turkey, the Kurdish cities were not so poor in comparison with the non-Kurdish cities. For example, Diyarbakir, also known as Ahmet, was a third.
You mind if kid?
Yeah. Okay. So. Ahmet, Diyarbakir was, in terms of economic strength, the third one within the Republic of Turkey. So in the 50s, like within the whole Turkish state, the migration started to the bigger cities of Turkey, especially Istanbul. Many Kurds also went to there. The economic situation was weak. That's why the Kurdish cities didn't grow so much like some big Turkish cities. In the cities, the economic situation, the so-called services, and so on, they remained quite weak, which is related to the colonialist approach of the Turkish state. In the end of 70s, when the leftist, Marxist-Leninist traditional left movements all around Turkey and Bakur were quite strong, there was a short break of, let's say, situation in the cities. Movements came up, political movements, some, let's say, social movements, initiatives, but even in some cities, in the elections, local elections, some, let's say, more progressive leftist mayors had been elected. In our region, it was the case for Ahmet and Batman, for example, but it was a short time. Then came the military coup in 1980, the third one. And this eliminated all progressive elements and structures in the cities, political, social, cultural. The cities experienced a kind of decrease of life quality and parallel to the political oppression. The cities continued to grow, of course, and the first steps of neoliberalization have been introduced to the cities of Bakur. In the 80s, as Javi described, the Kurdish freedom movement started an armed struggle. In the beginning of the 90s, it became strong. In 92, the Turkish state started a broad, let's say, extreme repression against the Kurds. Up to 4,000 villages have been destroyed and depopulated. Around 3 million people have been displaced, mainly from the villages. 1 million or so came to the cities of Bakur. The most went to the big cities of Turkey. Some came to Europe. And this was important and changed the character of the cities extremely. And this Ahmet, the population doubled within 3 years. Was the case with some other cities like Batman and Van and smaller cities. The infrastructure couldn't cover it, of course. The municipalities were weak. The state didn't support in any way the central government, the municipalities, the cities. The so-called civil society itself was still quite a little weak, not so organized yet, because of especially of the repression, and the movement was quite new. These years was the time of the proliferation of the cities. So big amount of people came, and it was but also characterized by the oppression. It changed in 1990 when there was the international plot against Öcalan, when the guerrilla war stopped by the PKK, and everything happened more or less same. There were the local elections and the legal Kurdish party at that time. I don't mention the name, let's say HDP, and won 37 municipalities. Later the number rose to over 100. So there was a new momentum because many things came together. A new political orientation discussion, as Harvey described. But the Kurdish freedom movement was confronted with now a certain space where they could act it. Let's say how big cities, there was not anymore a state-closed party, a nationalist, chauvinist, or Islamist, whatever else, or neoliberal. And the slowly a certain space for, let's say, civil organization structures came up. In these years, many new political movements, social movements, NGOs came up in the most cities of Bakur. There was a new dynamic. A lot of people started to organize themselves. The municipalities, they tried to develop more social policies, more ecological policies. But in the beginning, it was could not exceed much more, let's say, good social democratic policies. There were attempts to have more direct democracy, but they were not so organized. There were, let's say, attempts, kind of experiments between, until a democratic confederalism has been developed and declared. So it was a moment where the society, the political actors in the society came together and reorganized themselves. And in 2007, the Democratic Society Congress has been founded, which brought all the different actors together. Social movements, NGOs, unions, municipalities, parties, and, this is very important, the people's assemblies of the neighborhoods. So the movement started step by step to set up in the neighborhoods assemblies, where people of this area could join. The assemblies were structures where people started to organize themselves, different commissions, areas, dimensions, and much more people started to join political processes, decisions. Here, this was a time also when in the summer started discussing about the solution of the Kurdish question, but they did not really proceed. In 2006, there was a big uprising in the city of Ahmed, a very huge one, and the state was pushed back to its police headquarters. It was in spring 2006, and in Ahmed, 10 people have been killed by the state. It was over 3 days. And this was a moment where, after this, the states started to develop policies to oppress, instruments, how to oppress better the Kurdish movement in the cities. Anyway, let's say, with the Democratic Confederation, the new political concept, it developed. It was a time when the discussions were 2007 to 10, 11. For example, in 2010, we had a conference, important one, on ecology and local government. And the pillars, we had Democratic Confederation says we have the 3 pillars of a democratic, ecological, and gender-liberated society. In 2010, activists started to say we have still a 4th one. It is the communal economy, or the social economy, or the democratic economy. So the seek for a more democracy, more direct way, far away from state nationalism and representative democracy, got a new dynamic. It was a time when the 2 times as Mesopotamian social forums have been organized. In all these, let's say, discussions and developments, the women movement was very crucial. It was a very crucial element to make this revolutionary progresses and against hierarchical, patriarchal, other conservative pushbacks. Anyway, 2011-12, there was a time, it was a war in North Kurdistan, intensive repression. But after this, in 2013, a new discussion dynamic came up. And meanwhile, the cities became bigger and bigger. The majority of the Kurds in Baku lived in the cities. The cities grow and grow and grow. And we had also these high buildings, which you have seen in the pictures, not so high like in Istanbul, but many new quarters came up. But we had not a gentrification. They were built in new areas, free areas. Let's say more the traditional neighbors have not been destroyed, at least not by the municipality, which didn't support gentrification. But anyway, I mean, this people's assemblies, they became stronger. It was a time. Meanwhile, we had the start of the revolution in Rojava, from which the people in Baku could benefit in many ways. The economy movement came up in Baku in 2013. It started. So then came up, there have been initiated some dozen cooperatives. The discussion started how to develop an economy of solidarity. Our ecology movement became stronger. Discussions started more or less a stronger way in 2014. 2014, the discussion on communes, also in Bakur, came up. I mean, until then, we had the neighbor assemblies, people's assemblies. But as a next step, as a progress deepening, the communes have been discussed, and as I said, the experience from Rojava were important. Anyway, the relations to Rojava were quite dynamic. It was also the time when the first, let's say, bigger urban struggles have been carried out in Bakur, especially in the city of Ahmed, the biggest one, and the biggest organized one. There were some different campaigns and actions, and also our ecologists, they have been involved in these struggles, and they were mainly against the state policies, which the state intervened in the city planning, but also against some projects which have been, let's say, supported or at least not impeded by our, let's say, by our municipalities. 2014 was an important moment. There was a big uprising in October 2014 in solidarity with the people of Kobani. It was time where all around the world demonstrations have been done, but the protests in Baku and bigger cities of Turkey, they were very big and strong. It's, I mean, some of you may probably have joined it. This was a in one day, in all cities, there was a big uprising. What are the challenges in the cities? They are the repression in 2009, 11, and in the last 2 years, thousands of activists are in prison. And this is always a step back for the organization, or some organization structures solve, but many continue, but some have important problems to maintain. The neoliberalism, the last 5, 6, 7 years, came stronger to Bakur. It impacts people, also in our movement, impacts municipalities. There's a lot of money, and then you need a strong consciousness, awareness to struggle against it. And the economy movement, ecology movement are expressions against this. This growing women movement is an important actor in the sense, or the youth movement. General hierarchy is, of course, a big issue. I mean, okay, we have this progress. We we have the strategic ideological change, but still we have to resist against people. I mean, in a few years, it's not, of course, not very, I would say, accepted. Anyway, the municipalities experience some, of course, cases, cases of, say, as I said, with some projects and so on, the social democracy policies and so on. But anyway, but I can say that the last 3-4 years there have been done also some interesting progresses. So it's a way like some steps forward, some steps back, but in the end it goes forward. This is a development until now. And many issues are an issue of mentality and consciousness. So in 2015, having mentioned it, the war started again in Bakur. The Turkish state stopped all kind of negotiations July 2015. And just in this moment, let's say the communes have been set up, the people's assemblies of the neighborhood or cities were in discussion to declare self-governing, where they said, okay, we will govern ourselves, and we expect from the state that they do not interfere in our affairs, and we will accept it. But it started when the war started, and it was the start of the war is confronted with extreme repression, and so there was a very strong crackdown of the state, especially in the end of 2015. And so this process which started could not be really developed. And there was 30 cities self-defense against repression of the state, then an increased repression by the state. So the states, I would say, especially some cities, the confrontation concentrated in 4 or 5 cities in the winter of 2015 and 16. In the beginning, the people could defend their cities, but then the Turkish state came with military and much more forces, and then could, with massacres and extreme state terrorism, they could, let's say, take the territorial control of the state, of the cities. In 7 cities, high destruction has been experienced. In 7, it's a very intensive. And 3 cities, it's a very high level. These are the old city of Ahmet, also called Sur or Sur-İçi, and the city of Şırnak and Nusaybin. There, the highest destruction is. 70% of Şırnak and Nusaybin have been destroyed. And in Cizre and other cities, some neighborhoods, partly neighborhoods. So this was, the destruction happened after the, let's say, the military confrontation, not during. And the states implementing a policy where they wanted to change the demography of these areas in a way that from there no self-organizing or resistance can come back. And 250 up to 250,000 people have been completely displaced from the 7 cities, especially from the 3. And their houses are destroyed, they cannot come back. And they're still under destruction. The destruction have been destroyed, has been completed mainly. These are very political people, organized people. The society of Bakur could support them in a certain way. I mean, in terms of accommodation and food and so on. Better than in the 90s. The state now is building new housing projects by Turkey, the state agency on housing, and they have started with the construction. People have not come yet to these new places. We think that, let's say, higher classes or state-closed people will come mainly. Some people say maybe refugees from Syria, but we don't know this. Anyway, we think that the state used the confrontation, armed conflict in the cities to implement these policies, these plans, which must have existed before, at least the ideas. So they try to implement this. We are in this situation now. There is resistance, not in the way as we wish. Also related to the harsh crackdown and the state of emergency and the level of repression in Bakur, which is already close to fascism. This is what I would like to contribute, but I would like to also say some sentence on the questions which Havin couldn't answer. No. Anyway, there was a question on the communes, whether how much they need an upper coordination or organization on a higher level. I think as long as we have repression, as we have direct enemies, there's a force which will attack you. As long as you have a neoliberal capitalist environment, you need a good, strong coordination, but a crucial issue to have the strengths, especially on the basis in the communes. And we should, at this moment, we should not idealize like Kurdistan, Bakur and Rojava, like there are the communes and they organize everything. The highest upper structure coming together from the communes, they are also very important to defend it. I mean, the self-defense issue is a very crucial one against all the repression coming from northwest, the Turkish state, and from the south, Islamic states or other reactionary forces. I tried to explain in my presentation the relation between Rojava and Bakur. It's ideological, of course, the basic is ideological, but in the last 30, 40 years, people from Rojava, they fought in Bakur. In the last 3, 4 years, thousands of people from Bakur fight in Rojava. Many people are there, and they have always supported each other. And there are also many relations of families or relatives, and the economic relations between was in the last century also very strong. You cannot think the revolution of Rojava without the support of Bakur, or let's say the whole Kurdish freedom movement. And about the currency or economic system of Rojava, I could say much, but there's no own currency. They use the Syrian lira. But what they try to develop is a democratic communal economy, which was initiated in Bakur also, but in Rojava it's much more progressed as there is no state. You can implement policies as you want, but there are limitations by the embargo, war, and the centralized economy of the Syrian state, which has been developed in the last 40 years. And the aim is to have a self-sufficiency, but in doing this, they go step by step, and there's different forms of economic relations within Rojava. There are also those relations are not established or so, they are still existent, but they are not supported and they are not growing. And what's supported by the political structures are the structures of solidarity, especially cooperatives, and different in connection with democratic decision-making process. And the movement tries to bring the different actors in the economy together and not excluding some. Bring together means farmers, cooperatives, the women economy, but also trade and let's say light industry, where they must act together in democratic structures, so that not one power can dominate the other one, and the solidarity, or let's say balance, a real balance, is ensured. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Very good that you've blended in the answers also from having questions. We have some 10-15 minutes still for other comments or questions to both those presentations. Yes?
I would like to ask if there are, if you need and if you develop or use any tools in the assemblies in the city. So like in order to decision-making tools, group dynamics or stuff like that. And this can be of course related to how you deal with internal hierarchies, but not only this. Maybe what tools do you use in your assemblies?
Okay, you can pick some.
Thanks for both presentations. I have a question for Ercan. Two questions, if I may. First, I was wondering if you could say a few words. I'm very curious about the internal relations of the Kurdish movement. Talking about the rise of the urban movement in the mid-2000s. What was the relations between the PKK, between the political party at the moment, at the time, between the PKK, and how was the PKK adapting to, you know, like from a more rural-based insurgency to a more urban-based political reform process? How did the PKK relate to that? If you could say a few words on that. And my second question, looking at the situation now, with the very severe state crackdown by the Turkish state on in the Kurdish regions, to what extent is the democratic autonomy project still alive, and what are the prospects in your view? Is there still hope for it to continue, and if so, in what form?
Okay, I believe we start with those questions, and then I can collect some more.
About the assemblies, let's say on the communal level or assembly level, the aim is to take decisions after discussions on a consensus level. Consensus is important, and on the lower level you can do it. On the higher level, it's much more challenging. But if you can develop it as much as possible, this will impact the other structures and higher levels. For example, there's a committee for peace, which solves internal conflicts based on consensus. It's only consensus. If there's no consensus, then other structures, at least in Rojava, will come. And Bakur, it's in this term, it's much more limited. What are tools? Of course, the co-chair system is important. It's a man and a woman, but it's also two people always. You must think, men, women, and two people. There's a gender quota of at least 40%, and the women movement is also in the neighborhoods and communes active. They try to organize themselves down and involve as much as possible women, and as much as you can involve them, the more you can decrease internal hierarchy, you can fight it. Another actor is the youth, which is naturally more radical, and also an important actor on the lower level to give the structure a much more progressive, emancipative aspect. There are many committees working in different fields, and there are the dimensions. The Öcalan expressed 9 dimensions principally, and the most committees are oriented along this. Sometimes there are some changes, and each committee on a lower level is connected also to other committees on the same level and higher level. They create their own social movements. So the women movement, youth movement, they have their committees or structures within the communes, assemblies, and so on. It's not only the one from bottom to up, there are also the dimensions. This creates a different kind of let's say dynamic and a mechanism of control. Yes, about your question, I hope I could understand it. I mean, in Kurdistan, the whole struggle started with the PKK. Before there was no political party, no any kind or almost no kind of organization, civil society, and political and ideological ideas, approaches came from PKK and especially Öcalan. If you want to compare it with other movements or struggles, this is an important difference. I mean, the movement became, I mean, it started in the 70s, let's say, in the cities, but then went to the rural areas, started the guerrilla war. 91, the uprising started in the cities, but with repression it was cracked down. But when all the millions of people have been displaced again, then after with 2000, the movement focused more on the urban struggle. So the urban struggle became more in the center. So Ahmed, sometimes in the Rosh celebration there are 1 million people, in other cities there are some 100,000s, and there's quite a dynamic. And the DTK, the Democratic Society in Congress, bring the importance is to have a stronger political ideological perspective and the way how to organize, first where to go and how to organize, and bring different actors and relate. And the PKK, if you speak about parties, the HDP, or let's say the Kurdistan party within the Turkish state, it is DBP. Anyway, the DBP and HDP, they are also presented in the Democratic Society Congress. They are one actor within this, but they are not the dominant one or the leading one or so. They are one of many. And when there are elections, for example, the candidates are not only decided by themselves, they are decided by the different actors. It's important also to limit the hierarchy or alienation of a political party. So, so the political party has not a special stance, but PKK is not officially not party, but it's an ideology. It's considered as an ideological structure, something in the background, which the people are committed by themselves, and they are politicized by them, usually, or the most, the big majority, and they take it as a reference mostly. And there's an interaction. It's not like PKK says something and these people have to do it in the city. There's not this relation. PKK says, I give only the framework. And actually this is a good process. They give the framework, and the society, the actors, the movements, they start to organize themselves and to develop policies and implement policies. There's such kind of relation of certain, of course, challenges, and it has evolved over the years much more. I can report from my movement, from the ecology movement, where we have we had a last quite dynamic discussion, and we discussed what we want to do and what to do. But let's say the political framework of democratic confederalism was and is the basis for us.
Very good. Thank you. One more question. Two more questions, and then we have to end it. So, are there any more who want to sign up?
There's a beginning and an ending. So, two questions. First, the last chapter of Bookchin's Urbanization of our Cities is called A New Municipal Agenda. It's a programmatic perspective on how urban life
content and structure has to be reconstituted. And in the book that you wrote with Janet Beal, The Politics of Social Ecology, there are other elements that constitute an agenda, a program. What I want to know from you is all of this turbulence in the Kurdish majority or the Kurdish controlled cities, whether there is a common agenda for change. And if it is one, if there is one, what are the major elements of that vision for a new city? That's my first question. My second question is, when our two friends, comrades, were denied visas to come to Thessaloniki, I want to know the Greek embassy gave them as an excuse for the denial of the visas.
Okay. I had a comment and a question. My first comment is, for me, the what's happening in Turkey and in Kurdistan is so epic, so dramatic. It's like a Hollywood film in the last 2 years, 3 years. Like you have like extreme authoritarianism against extremely inspiring social movements. And for me, it's a confrontation that's a picture of where the world is going. You know, you have socialism, the communists, or barbarism. You know, it's really a very distilled example of where the world is headed all across the world. You know, all across the world. And so for me, the Kurdish struggle is so important for us to support, not only because they're doing amazing things, but because it's a picture. We have to learn from them to know how to fight capitalism in the 21st century and beyond. So I think that's very important. I had a question. I think it's very interesting, the interaction between the Kurdish movement and the Turkish movement, the Turkish left. And I was very struck by the history of how the Kurdish movement went beyond just the ethnic question and really worked hand in hand with the Kurdish left. And we've seen that with Harvin pointed out that the PKK, right from its origins, was founded with the Turkish left, or no, with some individuals maybe.
Inspired by it.
Okay, inspired by it. Okay. But in recent times, we've seen the DK, the HDP, the DTK, you know, Turkish and Kurdish, pan-Turkish movements. What's the current situation? What like, how does that, maybe it, we could hear from Hardis. What's the attitude of the Turkish left to the Kurdish movement at the moment? Is it all in favor of the Kurdish movement, or are just elements? And has the Kurdish movement had an impact on the Turkish left?
Yeah. Thank you. Action.
Yes, the Greek embassy didn't give any explanation, argumentation, or reason. Actually, they didn't get their passports yet back. The calls to the embassy didn't have any result, unfortunately. We will learn it in the next days. But what I know is that the embassy called them again and again, asked for different documents or asked different things. They applied 3 or 4 weeks ago, something like this, quite enough time actually. I mean, I wish a lot that they too come and they could have maybe, I'm sure, expressed some things much better. They're two important activists. So about the vision, the common agenda for change. Yeah, So there's a continuous discussion in Bakur on a common vision, where to go, how to go, and this is done in different levels, spheres, and interactions, but also within the Democratic Society Congress. I mean, this is a broad structure where there are so many movements, 15, 20, or I don't know, those of organizations on different levels, but it's not easy for us. If we have something important, we consider it as a crucial issue to bring it and to get discussed. But if you're insisting and working on it and trying to convince others, you can have certain success or progress. It is possible. There are some cases. If the others are open, are not, let's say, circles which dominate the structures, small circles. And there are, of course, tendencies again and again, but there's also a continuous struggle. This is an important character that you can break it again. So you have the space. You can enter with a strong discussion and open the space again. There's sometimes a moment where you say, oof, you don't feel so confident or have so hope. And the common vision, I mean, they are developed. The different movements discuss among themselves. They discuss with the movements with which we are related a lot for discussions and have discussions. The economy movement or the women movement. What we say, what we think, we discuss it with some other movements because they are interlapping. And for us, it's important what they think. There's such a kind of dynamic, and at a certain point we bring it to the let's say broader scale and to discuss it with the others. We try to create, let's say, awareness for it through the media which we have. We have the opportunities to go to the, let's say, left Kurdish media in Bakur or all of Turkey. And the main important thing is the face-to-face work. Anyway, there are some, the program of the DTK or the decisions or whatever else they have, the commissions, they're always an ongoing change. This is, I mean, the general vision, of course, is democratic confederalism, but but the societies are so, let's say, complex, or the questions, the things we are confronted, or the discussions become so broad that you have to think about many things. Anyway, about the current situation, there was a question where we have hope alive from Joris, and yes, we have the hope. Moment, it's a very difficult situation, but if you resist, if you are maintain your organization, and sometimes when you cannot go much to the streets, you can use it for discussions, for reorganization, and to rethink about your practice while you're in the situation. If you do it, then the time will come, we don't know when, maybe in 1 year, 2 years, some months, then we have the space again to act in a broader scale. And then there's something which is very important for us. It is the guerrilla. As long as the guerrilla can resist, it gives us also hope. And we have a second thing, it is the revolution of Rojava.
Yeah, okay, I think that here in the room there are friends that are more experts than me on the Kurdish movement, so I have just to say that after the Gezi uprising, there was a big discussion inside the archipelagos of different leftist and also anarchist groups about the to support or not, let's say, for example, the elections for the Kurdish party. And okay, I think that we have to learn from the Gezi Park, the negotiation of the different identities, and I don't know, probably after that there was a general spirit of disappointment, and probably a lot of radical critical groups, so they couldn't found an answer, and probably they split it, or I think that in the west part of Turkey, the situation is different from the eastern part, and more difficult to find concrete solutions, or to take a position, a concrete position.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. I think we need a break to have
And one thing, next thing we're gonna do, we're getting into to get some work done together. And for this, I want to bring with you a weapon. And with that, I mean to give you a pen, right? This is a really good weapon. So bring that with you for next work. Thank you.